Today we confront the colossal sagas of Odin, Frigg and Thor, the very pillars of the Aesir Pantheon. Welcome to The Purple Files. If you enjoy our videos, please consider subscribing to the channel. Let's get right into it. A universe was born in our first epic, the genesis of everything, Norse mythology's sources, primordial void and first beings. We highly recommend experiencing that journey first for the complete cosmic backstory. In the grand, sprawling tapestry of Norse mythology, woven with threads of cosmic creation, fierce battles, profound wisdom, and inevitable doom, few figures loom as large or as complex as Odin, the All-Father. He is not a deity easily defined, not a god confined to a single sphere of influence. Instead, Odin stands as a multifaceted entity, a being of seemingly endless contradictions and depths, a ruler, a wanderer, a sage, a warrior, a poet, a magician, and a seeker, whose presence and actions resonate through nearly every significant myth and legend of the North. To truly begin to comprehend the Aesir Pantheon, one must first endeavor to understand the enigmatic being who so often sits at its head. Our exploration of Odin commences with the myriad names and titles, the Hetir, by which he was known. In the world of skaldic poetry and ancient Norse lore, a name was far more than a mere label. It was an encapsulation of essence, a reflection of an individual's character, deeds, or domains. For a god as complex as Odin, these Hetir are numerous, each unveiling a different facet of his being, each a key to unlocking a deeper understanding of his divine nature. His primary name Odin, or Odin as it is commonly anglicized, is itself profoundly significant. It is believed to derive from the Old Norse word Odin, a potent and multifaceted term that can signify inspiration, divine fury, ecstatic frenzy, poetry, the mind, or the spirit. This single name, Odin, thus immediately paints a picture of a god intrinsically linked to the very wellsprings of consciousness, creativity, and the wild, untamed forces of both the mind and the natural world. He is the embodiment of that divine spark, that sacred madness that can seize poets, warriors, and seers alike, driving them to acts of extraordinary creation or valor. But Odin is merely the beginning. Let us delve into the rich lexicon of his Hetir, each a window into his soul. He is known as Allfather, the All-Father. This title speaks to his role as the ultimate progenitor, not just of many of the gods, but in a broader sense of humankind and the ordering of the cosmos. He is the patriarchal head, the supreme sovereign from whom divine and mortal lineages often trace their origins. As All-Father, he carries the weight of cosmic responsibility, the ultimate guardian and guide of the worlds he helped to shape. Closely linked to his authority, yet pointing to a more specific and somber duty, is the name Valfodr, the father of the slain. This title underscores Odin's profound connection to warfare, death, and the afterlife of warriors. It is he who chooses which heroes fallen in battle are worthy to be gathered by his Valkyries and brought to Valhalla, his great hall of the honored dead. Valfodr is the god who presides over this martial paradise, preparing his army of Einherjar for the final, cataclysmic battle of Ragnarok. His own profound sacrifices are remembered in names like Hangatyr, the god of the hanged, or the hanging god. This is a direct and stark reference to his self-sacrifice upon the world tree, Yggdrasil, where he hung for 9 agonizing nights, pierced by his own spear, to wrest the secrets of the runes from the depths of existence. Hangatyr is Odin in his aspect as the ultimate shaman, the one who undergoes a torturous ordeal to achieve transcendent wisdom. Another name that hints at his power over fate and bonds is Haptagud, the god of captives or the god of fetters. This suggests his ability to bind and to loose, to ensnare his enemies with magical fetters, both literal and metaphorical, and perhaps also to release those unjustly bound. It speaks to his mastery over constraints and freedoms. As a god who often travels the worlds, he is sometimes called Farmatyr. This name can be interpreted as the god of cargoes or god of burdens. perhaps invoked by travelers for protection on their journeys, or it could mean the god of the wayfarer, highlighting Odin's own ceaseless wanderings across the 9 realms. often in disguise, seeking knowledge and observing the deeds of mortals and gods alike. One of his oldest and most formidable names is Iga, meaning the terrible one or the awesome one. This name evokes a primal fear and respect, pointing to Odin's awe-inspiring power, his capacity for wrath, and his connection to the more dangerous, unpredictable aspects of divinity. It is from this name, Iga, that the world tree Yggdrasil derives its name, linking the tree of life to the terrible god who dared to hang upon it. In his many journeys and quests for knowledge, Odin frequently adopts disguises. This is reflected in the name Gungnir, meaning the masked one or the hooded one. When he appears as Gungnir, he is often testing the hospitality and wisdom of mortals, as famously recounted in the poem Grimnismal, where he endures torture before revealing his true identity and bestowing profound cosmic knowledge. The hood and mask conceal his divine majesty, allowing him to move unseen and unremarked, the better to observe and learn. Similarly, he is known as Gungnir, which translates to the wanderer or the way-weary. This name is particularly prominent in the Gylfaginning section of the Prose Edda, where King Gylfi encounters Odin in this guise, asking him questions about the nature of the cosmos, the gods, and the future. Gungnir is Odin the eternal seeker, his journeys fueled by an insatiable curiosity. His martial aspect is further emphasized by names such as Herhan, meaning the warrior or lord of hosts. This is Odin the general, the leader of armies, the one who marshals the forces of Asgard, and in the heat of battle, he is Hertiter, the glad of war or war-merry god, revealing a fierce joy and exultation in the clang of steel and the fury of combat. He is also Sigfoder, the father of victory, for it is often through his favor and strategic insight that victory in battle is achieved. His common disguises often feature specific attire, leading to names like Sidhotra, the broad hat or low-hanging hat god, and Sidskegga, the broad beard or long beard god. These simple descriptions paint a picture of the archetypal wanderer, his face often obscured by a wide-brimmed hat, his age and wisdom suggested by a long beard, allowing him to blend in and observe. Yet Odin is not always benevolent or straightforward. The name Bolverra, meaning evildoer or worker of misfortune, points to his morally ambiguous side. This is the Odin who is willing to use deceit, trickery, and even cause harm to achieve his long-term goals, most notably in the complex tale of his theft of the mead of poetry. Bolverra acknowledges that the All-Father's path to wisdom and power is not always paved with noble deeds. In his appearance to King Gylfi, he also uses the names Thridi, the Third, Har, the High One, and Jafnir, the Justice High or Even High, presenting himself as a mysterious trinity of divine knowledge. Other names hint at more specific powers or characteristics. Svafnir, which can mean sleep-bringer, a name also curiously given to one of the serpents gnawing Yggdrasil, perhaps alluding to his ability to induce sleep, trance, or send visions in dreams. Vidrir, meaning ruler of weather or storm ruler, connects him to the wilder atmospheric forces, perhaps an echo of his own tempestuous nature. Got, or Gaut, is an ancient name, possibly linking him to the tribe of the Gets, or Goths, or it could mean the Pura, perhaps of inspiration or libations. Mjöllnir, meaning the much wise, or perhaps the concealer, speaks to his vast repository of hidden knowledge and his often secretive ways. Oski, the god of wishes or wish-granter, suggests his power to fulfill desires, though such wishes granted by Odin often come with unforeseen consequences or a hidden price. Thunder is a name whose meaning is debated, possibly the Thunderer, though this is Thor's primary domain, or perhaps the thin/pale one, referring to an ascetic aspect. A darker, more ominous name is Helblindi, the Hellblinder, or Deathblinder, hinting at his power over the realm of the dead, or his ability to deceive death itself. This is but a selection, for the ancient texts list many dozens of such heitir. Each one, like a carefully cut facet of a gemstone, reflects a different light from the complex crystal of Odin's being, revealing a god who is at once a creator and a destroyer, a sage and a trickster, a king and a wanderer, a god of terrible majesty and profound, often painful wisdom. To understand Odin further, we must look to his genealogy, for his lineage is as significant as his many names, blending the divine with the primal forces of the giants. Odin was not born in isolation. His heritage is a potent mix that shapes his very essence. His ultimate divine ancestor was Buri, the first of the god kin, licked into existence from the salty rhinestones by the primordial cow Odhumla in the dawn of time. Buri was fair, great and powerful, the progenitor from whom the race of gods would spring. Buri sired a son named Bor. It was Bor who became the direct father of Odin. Bor himself is a somewhat less detailed figure in the myths, primarily serving as the crucial generational link between the first god ancestor and the triad of brothers who would shape the cosmos. Odin's mother, however, was Besla, and this is a fact of paramount importance. Besla was not of the direct god line of Buri and Bor. She was a Jotun, a giantess, the daughter of the formidable giant Bolthorn, whose name translates to evil thorn or baleful thorn, suggesting a being of significant, perhaps dangerous power and ancient wisdom from the giantish race. This union of Bor, son of Buri, with Bestla, daughter of Bolthorn, was a mingling of two distinct primordial lines. Through Bestla, Odin inherited the blood of the giants, the raw elemental might and arcane knowledge of these ancient beings. This Jotun heritage is crucial to understanding Odin's complex nature, his access to primal powers, his often tumultuous relationship with the giants, who were in a sense his kin, and perhaps even the source of his relentless, almost desperate drive for knowledge and control in a universe born of chaotic forces. Bestla also had an unnamed brother, the son of Bolthorn, from whom, according to the Havamal, Odin learned 9 powerful magic songs, further emphasizing the flow of giantish wisdom into Odin's repertoire. Odin was not an only child. He had 2 brothers, born of the same union of Bor and Bestla. Vili, whose name signifies will or conscious desire, and Ve, whose name means sacred enclosure or hello. Together, these 3 brothers, Odin, Vili, and Ve, formed a ruling triad in the early cosmos. It was they who, according to most accounts, slew the primordial giant Ymir, and from his colossal corpse fashioned the heavens and the earth and all the realm. It was also they who, finding 2 lifeless trees upon the seashore, endowed them with the gifts that made them the first humans, Aska and Embla. Though Odin would later rise to become the preeminent ruler of Asgard, his brothers Vili and Ve share in these foundational acts of creation and ordering. Odin's own family, his consorts and offspring further illustrate his connections and his influence. His principal wife, the Queen of Asgard, is the wise and prescient goddess Frigg, who will be explored in her own right. With Frigg, Odin fathered beloved sons such as the radiant Balder, whose tragic death is a pivotal event in Norse eschatology, and likely also the blind god Hodra, who unwittingly becomes the instrument of Balder's demise, and the swift messenger Hermod. However, Odin's liaisons were not confined to Frigg. One of his most famous and powerful sons, Thor, the mighty god of thunder, was born from Odin's union with Jord, the personification of the earth itself, a giantess of immense power. This union of Skyfather Odin with Earth Mother Jord is a common mythological motif, producing a son who embodies the strength and vitality of both realms. Other significant sons born from unions with giantesses include Vidar, born of the Jotunngridr, a mostly silent god destined to avenge his father Odin at Ragnarok by slaying the wolf Fenrir, and Vali, born of the giantess Ridre, who was conceived for the specific purpose of avenging Balder's death, a deed he accomplished when only 1 night old. The question of Tyr's parentage is complex. Some sources name him as Odin's son, while others make him the son of the giant Hymir, highlighting the often tangled genealogies of the gods. Beyond these divine offspring, Odin was also considered an ancestor to many human royal dynasties, such as the Skjoldungs in Denmark and the Yinglings in Scandinavia, with figures like Seyminga being named as his son by the giantess Skadi. thus linking the divine realm directly to the lineage of mortal kings and heroes. This intricate web of relationships, particularly his Jotun heritage and his unions with giantesses, underscores Odin's role as a liminal figure, bridging different worlds and embodying a synthesis of diverse powers. The roles of Odin are as numerous and varied as his names, reflecting his position as the preeminent though not omnipotent deity of the Aesir. He is first and foremost the king of the Aesir and the Allfather, the ruler of Asgard presiding over the divine council. In this capacity, he is a figure of authority, a dispenser of wisdom in council, and a force for maintaining order among the often boisterous gods, though, paradoxically, he himself sometimes instigates chaos to achieve his far-reaching plans. Paramount among his roles is that of the god of wisdom and knowledge. Odin's thirst for knowledge is insatiable, a driving force behind many of his myths and his most profound sacrifices. He is the master of the sacred runes, the keeper of esoteric lore, and a seer of considerable power, though his prophetic abilities are sometimes matched or even surpassed by goddesses like Frigg or various vulvas, the seeresses he consults. His wisdom is not passively held, but actively, often painfully acquired. Flowing directly from his connection to Ordra is his role as the god of poetry and inspiration. He is the ultimate source of poetic skill, the divine meed of poetry having been won through his cunning and daring. Skalds and poets look to him for the fire of inspiration, and this same Ordra could manifest as the battle frenzy that seized warriors, transforming them into fearless berserkers. Odin is undeniably a god of war and battle, but his approach to warfare differs significantly from the straightforward might of his son Thor. Odin is the master strategist, the god of cunning tactics, battlefield psychology, and the inspiration of martial fury. As Valfadr, the father of the slain, he, with his Valkyries, chooses which warriors will fall in battle and earn a place in Valhalla. He can grant victory to his favored side, or, just as easily, bring about unexpected defeat, often through magical means such as the fetter of war, which could paralyze enemy hosts. This leads to his role as a god of magic, a master of both Cedar and Galder. Cedar was a form of shamanistic magic, often involving trance, divination, and the manipulation of fate, typically considered a practice more common among women, yet Odin, in his relentless pursuit of all forms of power, became its proficient practitioner, an act that even incurred some scorn from Loki for its perceived unmanliness. Galder refers to magical incantations, the chanting of powerful spells, often rune-based, another domain where Odin excelled. His magical abilities also included potent shape-shifting, allowing him to transform into various animals or birds to achieve his aims. As the Lord of Valhalla, Odin is also a god of the dead, or more specifically, the glorious dead of the battlefield. He presides over his magnificent hall, gathering the Einherjar, his chosen champions, to feast, train, and await the final confrontation of Ragnarok. His connection to the dead extends beyond Valhalla, as he is known to consult with the spirits of the deceased, most notably the reanimated head of Mimir and various seeresses summoned from their graves. Odin is also the quintessential wanderer god, the god of journeys. Disguised as Gungnir, Gungnir, or countless other humble figures, he travels extensively throughout the 9 realms. These journeys are not idle, they are quests for information, opportunities to test the wisdom and hospitality of mortals and giants, and a means of staying attuned to the currents of fate and the machinations of his enemies. Lest we forget his foundational role, Odin is a creator god. Alongside his brothers Vili and Ve, he participated in the slaying of the primordial giant Ymir, and from Ymir's body shaped the cosmos, the earth, the sky, the seas. And it was this same triad that found Askra and Embla, the first humans, and gifted them with life, consciousness, and form. However, to paint a complete picture, we must also acknowledge Odin as a god of deceit and trickery, the Bolverka, the evildoer. His pursuit of wisdom and power often led him down morally ambiguous paths, He was known to break oaths when it suited his long-term strategy, to employ manipulation and cunning, and to engage in theft, as seen in the myth of the mead of poetry. This willingness to operate in the grey areas, to use means that other gods might shun, adds a layer of dangerous unpredictability and profound complexity to his character. He is not simply good. He is a god who understands that power in a chaotic universe sometimes requires difficult, even unsavory choices. Central to Odin's acquisition of his profound wisdom and unique powers are his sacrifices, acts of immense personal cost undertaken for even greater gains. These are not offerings made on an altar to another deity. These are sacrifices of parts of himself, to himself, or to the fundamental forces of the cosmos, in exchange for transcendent understanding. The first and perhaps most visually iconic of these is the sacrifice of his eye for wisdom at Mimisbrunner, deep beneath one of the roots of the world tree Yggdrasil in the realm of Jotunheimr lies Mimir's well, a fount whose waters hold unparalleled wisdom and understanding of all things. This well is guarded by the ancient and exceptionally wise being Mimir, the Rememberer. Odin, driven by his unquenchable thirst for knowledge, journeyed to this sacred well. He sought a drink from its potent waters, but Mimir would not grant such a boon freely. The price for a single draught of that concentrated wisdom was one of Odin's own eyes. Without hesitation, or so the myths imply, Odin agreed to this grim payment. He gouged out one of his eyes and pledged it to Mimir, or placed it within the well itself. Only then was he permitted to drink. The wisdom he gained was immeasurable, a deep insight into the secrets of existence, the workings of fate, and the hidden law of the cosmos. From that day forward, Odin walked the worlds as a one-eyed god, his missing eye a perpetual testament to the profound price he was willing to pay for knowledge, a constant reminder that true understanding often requires a painful relinquishing of a part of oneself. Even more profound and more harrowing was Odin's self-sacrifice on Yggdrasil for the runes, an ordeal meticulously detailed in the cryptic and powerful verses of the Havamal, the Sayings of the High One, a collection of wisdom poetry attributed to Odin himself. In stanzas 138 through approximately 141, Odin recounts this shamanistic trial. He declares, Vakika erkek, a vingardum vidi nitor ala neo, geri undada ok gefin odni selforum me. This translates to, I know that I hung on a windswept tree 9 full nights, wounded with a spear and given to Odin, myself to myself. Let us unpack the layers of meaning here. The windswept tree is universally understood to be Yggdrasil, the colossal world ash that binds the 9 realms. For 9 full nights, a number deeply significant in Norse magic and ritual, Odin endured this suspension. He was wounded with a spear, a self-inflicted wound, mirroring the ritualistic wounding often found in shamanic initiations, and he was given to Odin, myself to myself, a sacrifice made not to an external deity, but to his own higher divine essence, or to the very principle of Odinhood, an offering of his mortal aspect to attain a transcendent state. He continues, describing the tree. E thyme meadi, amangi veit geves hanaf renon. On that tree of which no man knows from what roots it runs. This emphasizes the profound mystery of Yggdrasil, its origins hidden even from most gods, a conduit to the deepest secrets of existence. During this ordeal, he suffered complete deprivation. Vid hlerfi mix heldu ne vid honegi. No bread did they give me, nor a drink from a horn. He was utterly alone, pushed to the very brink of death, his senses heightened by starvation, thirst, and agony. Then comes the moment of revelation. Naiste ek nidern, nam ikup runa, apandi nam, fail ik after thadan. I peered downwards. I took up the runes. Screaming, I took them. Then I fell back from there. He peered downwards, perhaps into the abyssal depths beneath Yggdrasil, towards the well of Urd, where fate is woven, or into the very source of all knowledge. In that state of extreme suffering and heightened consciousness, He took up the runes. He did not invent them, but rather apprehended them, seized them, understood their intrinsic power and meaning. The runes in this context are not merely letters of an alphabet, but potent mystical symbols, ideographs embodying the fundamental principles, energies, and secrets of the cosmos. To take up the runes means to grasp their sacred lore, their magical applications in divination, spellcasting, and the shaping of reality. He's screaming, "I took them." This apandi, or screaming, suggests the immense effort, the ecstatic agony, or the overwhelming power of the revelation as it flooded his being. It was not a gentle acquisition of knowledge, but a violent, transformative seizing of profound mystery. And then, his ordeal complete, the knowledge secured, he fell back from there, returning from that liminal space between life and death, forever changed by the experience. The gain from this near-fatal self-sacrifice was the mastery of the runes, and with them, access to a potent form of magic and a deeper understanding of the hidden architecture of the universe. This ordeal solidifies Odin's position as the ultimate shaman god, the one who journeys to the brink of oblivion and returns with sacred, transformative knowledge for the benefit, and sometimes the manipulation, of gods and mortals. While these two are his most detailed and significant sacrifices, Odin's entire existence can be seen as a series of ongoing offerings. His constant wanderings, often in hardship and disguise, are a sacrifice of comfort and security for the sake of information. The emotional burden of his vast foreknowledge, particularly concerning the inevitable doom of Ragnarok and the death of his beloved son Balder, events he foresees but cannot fully prevent, is a continuous, tormenting sacrifice of peace of mind. Though these are not ritualistic sacrifices for a specific gain in the same way as his eye or his hanging, they contribute to the image of a god perpetually paying a price for his unique position and unparalleled, yet often burdensome, wisdom. His is a path defined by giving of himself, in myriad ways, to grasp the elusive threads of fate and power in a profoundly complex and often perilous cosmos. Frigg, the foremost among the goddesses, wife of Odin and queen of Asgard, embodies the virtues of queenship, motherhood, and profound, often silent wisdom. Her name itself, Frigg, is thought to be related to words signifying love, beloved, or perhaps free, hinting at her cherished position and her inherent dignity. While Odin roams the 9 realms in pursuit of knowledge and power, Frigg often presides with grace and authority in their celestial home, her influence a steady, guiding presence. Delving into Frigg's genealogy reveals a curious and significant obscurity, particularly when contrasted with the more clearly, though still complexly, delineated lineage of her husband Odin. The primary sources are notably reticent about her parentage. Snorri Sturluson in Skaldskaparmal states that Frigg is the daughter of Fjorglin. However, the identity of this Fjorglin is itself a matter of some ambiguity within Norse texts. The name Fjorgyn also appears in a masculine form, sometimes named as an alternative father for Thor instead of Odin, with Jord as mother, and also in a feminine form, Fjorgyn, identified as Thor's mother and thus equated with Jord, the earth. If Frigg's father is the male deity Fjorgyn, it positions her within a divine lineage, though one that is not extensively detailed. If Fjorgyn is more abstractly connected to the concept of earth, similar to Jord, it would give Frigg a chthonic, earth-connected heritage, which could align with her aspects as a goddess of fertility and domestic life. The myths do not provide a clear maternal line for Frigg, leaving her origins somewhat shrouded in ancient mystery. This lack of a detailed, universally agreed-upon genealogy for such a prominent goddess is intriguing. It might suggest her exceptionally ancient, perhaps primordial nature, a goddess whose origins predate many of the more structured narratives. Alternatively, it could reflect a deliberate vagueness within the surviving myths, her identity and importance being defined more by her roles and relationships than by a complex ancestral tree. Unlike Odin, whose Jotun heritage is a key to his character, Frigg stands somewhat more genealogically isolated, her power and status seemingly inherent. Generally, specific siblings for Frigg are not named in the primary Eddic texts, further emphasizing her unique position. It is also worth acknowledging, though with caution, the long-standing scholarly discussion concerning the relationship between Frigg and another prominent Vanir goddess, Freyja. Some scholars have proposed that Frigg and Freyja may have originated as a single goddess who later diverged into two distinct figures in the Norse pantheon. Given their sometimes overlapping domains, such as associations with love, aspects of fertility, and even forms of magic or prophecy. However, within the Eddic poems and Snorri's Prose Edda, Frigg and Freyja are presented as clearly distinct individuals with different parentage: Frigg, daughter of Fjorglin and wife of Odin; Freyja, daughter of Njordra, sister of Freyja and wife of the mysterious Od. They have different halls, different attendants, and distinct personalities and myths. While their functions may sometimes touch upon similar themes, the textual evidence strongly supports their portrayal as separate goddesses, each with her own unique sphere of influence. Our focus here remains on Frigg as she is presented in these core sources. As Queen of Asgard and the wife of Odin, Frigg's queenly roles are central to her identity. She is the highest-ranking goddess, the mistress of the Aesir court, embodying dignity, authority, and grace. While Odin may be the ultimate sovereign in matters of war and cosmic strategy, Frigg holds sway over the domestic and social order within Asgard. She is often seen as the divine patroness of marriage, marital fidelity, and the household arts. Her association with spinning and weaving is particularly significant. Like the Norns who spin the threads of fate, Frigg's weaving can be seen as symbolic of her role in shaping destinies, maintaining the fabric of social order, and her skill in domestic crafts, elevated to a divine level. Her distaff is a recognized emblem of her domain. Her role as a protectress extends naturally to motherhood and childbirth. She is the preeminent maternal figure among the Aesir, invoked by women seeking blessings for fertility or protection during labor. She is a compassionate guardian of mothers and their children, her influence extending to the most fundamental aspects of family life. Beyond her domestic and maternal roles, Frigg is a valued counselor and confidant to Odin. The All-Father, for all his wisdom, often seeks her counsel, and she is privy to many of his secrets and plans. The myths suggest a relationship of mutual respect, where Frigg's insights are highly regarded, even if Odin, in his driven nature, does not ultimately alter the course of preordained fate. She is said to know many hidden things, sometimes possessing knowledge that even Odin himself lacks. Her influence is also felt in the maintenance of social order and the sanctity of oaths, particularly those pertaining to marriage, family, and kinship bonds. She represents propriety and the upholding of sacred trusts within the community of gods, and by extension among mortals who looked to the gods as models. One of Frigg's most profound and defining attributes is her power of prophecy. It is explicitly stated in the Lokasenna that Frigg, Orlog Allrevate, meaning she knows all fates, the destinies of all beings. However, a crucial distinction is made. Thot hon eva sigi, though she herself does not speak prophecies aloud, or at least not often or openly. This presents a fascinating contrast to Odin, who actively and often arduously seeks out prophetic knowledge from external sources like Mimir's well or by summoning seeresses. Frigg appears to possess this comprehensive foreknowledge more innately, as an inherent part of her being. This profound prescience, coupled with her tendency towards silence regarding these future events, adds a tragic depth to her character. Imagine the burden of knowing the terrible fates awaiting her loved ones, especially the impending doom of her beloved son Balder, yet being unable, or perhaps unwilling due to the immutable nature of destiny, to fully articulate or prevent these calamities. Her silence is not one of ignorance, but perhaps of profound sorrow and an understanding of the inescapable nature of word. This knowledge shapes her actions, particularly in her desperate attempts to protect Balder, and deepens the pathos of her inevitable grief. Her marriage to Odin is the foremost divine union in the Aesir Pantheon, a partnership that forms the bedrock of Asgard's ruling structure. Their relationship is complex, built on shared sovereignty and mutual respect for each other's domains, but it is not without its nuances. Odin is the restless wanderer, often absent on his quests for knowledge, his nature sometimes secretive, even from his queen. Frigg, in turn, possesses her own quiet wisdom, her own sphere of influence, and endures her own sorrows, sometimes in stoic silence. They rule together, yet both operate with considerable independence. The slanderer Loki, in his venomous tirade during the feast described in Loki's Senna, hurls accusations of infidelity at Frigg, claiming she had affairs with Odin's own brothers, Vili and Vi, during one of Odin's long absences. While these accusations are part of Loki's characteristic pattern of malicious rumor-mongering and lack corroboration in other primary myths, they hint at the complexities and potential tensions even within divine marriages, or perhaps serve as literary devices to explore themes of loyalty and transgression. Frigg's response to Loki is generally one of dignified attempts to silence him or to steer the conversation, rather than a direct, detailed refutation of these particular charges, maintaining her queenly composure under duress. Frigg's role as mother is perhaps where her emotional depth and significance are most poignantly expressed. She is the primary maternal figure among the Aesir, and her love for her children is a defining characteristic. Her most beloved son was Balder the Beautiful, the shining god of light, purity, and joy. Frigg's adoration for Balder was boundless, and her grief at his foretold and eventual death is one of the most profound and moving expressions of sorrow in all of Norse mythology. Her desperate efforts to protect him from harm and her subsequent inconsolable mourning elevate her to an archetype of maternal love and loss. She is also considered the mother of Hodder, the blind god who, through Loki's cruel manipulation, unwittingly becomes the instrument of Balder's death. The tragedy of one son causing the death of another, both born of the same mother, adds an unbearable layer to Frigg's suffering. Another son often attributed to Frigg and Odin is Hermod the Brave, who embodies filial devotion when he undertakes the perilous journey to the realm of Hel, in an attempt to bargain for Balder. While Odin had other children by different consorts, such as Thor by Jord and Vidar and Vali by giantesses, Frigg's primary maternal focus in the myths is on her sons with Odin, particularly Balder. Her story is a powerful testament to the fierce protective instincts and the profound enduring grief that can define motherhood. Frigg's magnificent dwelling in Asgard is her hall, Fensalir. The name translates as fen halls, marsh halls, or possibly even sea halls. The etymology suggests a location that is perhaps watery, misty, or secluded, imbuing it with an atmosphere of mystery and tranquility. If fen or marsh, it could connect Fensalir to places of hidden wisdom, quiet contemplation, or even sorrow, particularly in the aftermath of Balder's death. If sea halls, it might imply depth, vastness, and the profound nature of the goddess who resides there. Fensalir is a place of queenly dignity where Frigg presides over her retinue of handmaidens, where she likely engages in her sacred weaving, and where she might contemplate the intricate patterns of fate that she alone fully comprehends. It is the center of her power, her sanctuary, and the heart of her domain within Asgard. Frigg is not a solitary queen. She is attended by a retinue of loyal handmaidens or attendant goddesses, each with her own specific functions and significance, highlighting the breadth of Frigg's concerns and her queenly status. The foremost among these is Fulla, whose name means fullness or bounty. Fulla is described as a virgin goddess with beautiful flowing hair, often adorned with a golden band. She is Frigg's closest confidant, privy to all of her mistress's secrets. Fulla is entrusted with carrying Frigg's Eskia, a small ornate chest or casket, which likely held Frigg's valuables, treasures, or perhaps symbols of her secret knowledge. She is also said to look after Frigg's footwear, a seemingly humble task that nonetheless signifies deep trust and personal service. Fulla's importance is further underscored by her appearance in the second Merseburg charm, an old High German incantation, where she is named alongside Frigg as Freya and Odin as Woden in a ritual to heal Balder's injured horse, indicating her recognized role in Frigg's closest circle and her association with healing or protective magic. Another key attendant is Hlin, whose name means protectress or refuge. Hlin's specific duty is to protect those individuals whom Frigg wishes to save from danger or harm. She is a goddess of safeguarding, consolation, and sanctuary. So closely was she associated with this role that Hlin also became a poetic kenning, or metaphorical term, for woman or lady, implying that all women, in a sense, could embody this protective, nurturing quality. Na serves as Frigg's swift messenger. Her name might mean to tower over or to ride swiftly. Na is tasked with carrying Frigg's messages and undertaking her errands throughout the 9 realms. For these journeys, she rides a remarkable horse named Hufvapnir, which translates to hoof tosser or hoof thrower. This magical steed has the ability to travel not only over land, but also through the air and across the sea, allowing Gunnar to reach any destination with incredible speed. Through Gunnar, Frigg maintains her awareness of events unfolding in distant lands, gathering information and extending her influence. Beyond these 3, other goddesses are sometimes mentioned in connection with Frigg's retinue, each representing an aspect of her broader domain. Lofnan, whose name means praise or permission, is a gentle goddess, said to arrange unions and marriages, even those that might otherwise be forbidden, by obtaining permission from Odin and Frigg. Var, meaning pledge or oaths, listens to the sacred oaths and private agreements made between men and women. She is a guardian of vows and is said to punish those who break their solemn promises. Sin, whose name signifies denial or refusal, guards the door of Frigg's hall, Fensalir, and denies entry to those who are not permitted or who are unworthy. Her name is invoked in legal settings when one wishes to formally deny an accusation or block a legal claim. Shofen, meaning affection or love-longing, is a goddess who has the power to turn the minds of both men and women towards love and desire. Notra, whose name means wise, prudent, or graceful, is a goddess known for her wisdom and her graceful, dignified bearing. The Old Norse adjective snotra, meaning wise or clever, is derived from her name. Eir, meaning mercy, help, or peace, is a goddess renowned for her skills in healing, considered the best of all physicians. Though Eir is also sometimes listed among the Valkyries, Snorri Sturluson includes her among Frigg's attendants, highlighting Frigg's connection to healing and well-being. Gifjun, the giver, is often associated with virginity, and it is said that women who die unmarried become her attendants in the afterlife. Gifjun also has a significant independent myth concerning her creation of the Danish island of Zealand by ploughing it from the land of Sweden, but her association with Frigg's circle suggests a connection to themes of bounty and perhaps female community. This company of goddesses surrounding Frigg demonstrates the vast scope of her influence, encompassing secrets and trust, protection and messaging, love and marriage, oaths and wisdom, healing and social grace. They are extensions of her queenly power and her deep concern for the fabric of life. The myths directly involving Frigg serve to illuminate her character, her powers, and her profound emotional depth. By far the most central and defining of these is the tragic death of Balder. This saga showcases Frigg's immense love for her son, her prophetic anxieties, her desperate attempts to secure his safety, and her inconsolable grief. Frigg, plagued by premonitions and dreams foretelling Balder's doom, embarked on a monumental quest. He travelled throughout all the worlds, extracting a solemn oath from every single thing: fire and water, iron and all kinds of metals, stones, earths, trees, sicknesses, beasts, birds, poisons, serpents, that they would not harm her beloved son. So successful was her endeavour that the gods in Asgard made a sport of Balder's newfound invulnerability, hurling missiles and striking blows at him, only to see everything turn aside without leaving a scratch. But there was one oversight, one seemingly insignificant thing that Frigg had deemed too young and harmless to bother taking an oath from: the mistletoe. The cunning and malevolent Loki, ever seeking to create mischief and sow discord, discovered this single vulnerability. Disguising himself as an old woman, Loki approached Frigg and subtly tricked her into revealing this secret. Armed with this knowledge, Loki fashioned a dart from the mistletoe and sought out Balder's blind brother Hoda, who stood apart from the god's sport, unable to participate. Loki offered to guide Hoda's hand so that he too could honor Balder. Hoda, unsuspecting, took the mistletoe dart and, directed by Loki, hurled it at Balder. The seemingly harmless sprig pierced the shining god, and Balder fell dead, his light extinguished from Asgard. Frigg's grief was immediate and overwhelming, a sorrow that shook the foundations of the divine realm. In her anguish, she uttered a desperate plea, asking who among the Aesir would earn all her love and favor by daring to ride the perilous road to Hel, the realm of the dead, to bargain with the goddess Hel for Balder's return. Her son, Hermod the Brave, volunteered for this grim quest. After a perilous journey, Hermod reached Hel and pleaded for his brother's release. Hel agreed, but on one seemingly simple condition. Every single thing in all the 9 realms, living and dead, animate and inanimate, must weep for Balder to prove that he was universally beloved. If even one refused, Balder must remain in Hel. Frigg and the Aesir sent messengers throughout all the worlds, and indeed all things wept for Balder: humans, animals, earth, stones, trees, and metals, just as they do when they come from frost into warmth. But as the messengers were returning, their mission seemingly accomplished, they came upon a giantess sitting in a cave. Her name was Thok, which means thanks, though her gratitude was cruelly absent. When asked to weep for Balder, Thok callously replied, "Thok will weep dry tears for Balder's burial. Let Hel hold what she has." It was widely believed that this recalcitrant giantess was none other than Loki in another disguise, ensuring that his malicious deed would not be undone. And so, because of Thok's refusal, Balder's fate was sealed. He had to remain in the gloomy realm of Hel until after the fires of Ragnarok had cleansed the world. Frigg's sorrow became an enduring feature of her being, a constant reminder of her profound loss and the limits of even a queen's power against the implacable force of destiny and the malice of a determined foe. Another myth that reveals a different facet of Frigg's character, one marked by cunning and a willingness to engage in a contest of wits with her husband, is found in the preamble to the poem Grimnismalm, concerning Odin and Frigg's wager over their respective foster sons. Odin and Frigg were seated together in Hilaskalf, Odin's high seat from which he could observe all the 9 realms. They looked down upon the world of men and spoke of 2 young princes, Agnar and Geirrod, sons of King Hrudingar. Odin had secretly fostered Geirrod, teaching him wisdom and kingcraft, while Frigg had taken the other brother, Agnar, under her wing. Odin boasted that his foster son Geirrod was now a prosperous king, ruling wisely over his lands. Frigg retorted that her foster son Agnar was so poor that he was living in a cave and begetting children with a giant. This led to a wager. Odin claimed Geirrod was renowned for his generosity, while Frigg countered that he was so miserly and inhospitable that he would torture his guests if he thought there were too many. To settle the wager, Odin decided to visit Geirrod himself, disguised as the wanderer Gungnir. However, Frigg, keen to win their bet, or perhaps to teach Odin a lesson, dispatched her loyal handmaiden Fulla ahead of Odin. Fulla warned King Geirrod that a dangerous magician, a sorcerer who could bewitch him, would soon arrive at his court, and that he could be recognized by the fact that no dogs, no matter how fierce, would dare to attack him. She advised Geirrod to seize and torture this stranger. When Odin, as Gungnir, arrived, he was indeed set upon by Geirrod's men and, true to Frigg's machinations, subjected to cruel torment, bound between 2 fires for 8 nights. Eventually Geirrod's young son, also named Agnar after his uncle, showed Gungnir kindness, offering him a drink. This act of compassion prompted Odin to reveal his true identity and recite the profound cosmic wisdom of the Grimnismal, after which King Geirrod, realizing his terrible mistake and rushing to free Odin, tripped and fell upon his own sword, thus meeting his demise. This tale portrays Frigg not merely as a passive queen, but as an active participant in divine games of strategy, capable of cunning and deception even against her own husband, to prove a point or protect her interests. It reveals a more assertive and perhaps even competitive aspect of her personality. Frigg also endures Loki's vicious slanders in the poem Lokasana. During a feast in Aegir's hall, Loki, after being admitted, proceeds to insult each of the gods and goddesses present. When he turns his venomous tongue upon Frigg, he accuses her of promiscuity, claiming that she, the wife of Odin, had slept with both of Odin's brothers, Vili and Ve. He further taunts her with the knowledge of Balder's fate, implying her powerlessness. Frigg's responses throughout Loki's tirade are generally characterized by attempts to maintain decorum, to silence the slanderer, or to defend others, rather than engaging in a direct point-by-point refutation of his personal attacks. She bears his insults with a degree of queenly composure, though the sting of his words is evident. The truth of Loki's accusations regarding Vili and Ve remains debatable, given his nature as a malicious fabricator, but the scene highlights Frigg's position and her vulnerability to such verbal assaults within the often brutal social dynamics of the gods. A brief but significant appearance of Frigg occurs outside the purely Norse corpus, in the second Merseburg charm, one of two Old High German magical incantations discovered in the 9th or 10th century. The charm describes a scene where Fall, often identified with Balder, and Woden are riding to the woods, and Balder's horse sprains its foot. The charm then lists several divine figures who chant magical spells to heal the horse, including Freya, Fulla, referred to as her sister or attendant. This precious fragment demonstrates Frigg's association with healing magic and her close connection with Fulla in a wider Germanic context, attesting to her ancient and widespread importance beyond Scandinavia. Through these myths and attributes, Frigg emerges as a figure of immense complexity and quiet strength. She is the dignified queen of Asgard, the loving and grieving mother, the wise but often silent prophetess, and a goddess whose concerns span marriage, household, protection, and the very fabric of social and cosmic order. Her wisdom is often veiled, her power expressed with subtlety, but her presence is fundamental to the Norse Pantheon, a symbol of enduring love, profound loyalty, deep sorrow, and unwavering queenly dignity in a world often fraught with conflict and impending doom. Her story, particularly her central role in the tragedy of Balder, resonates with a timeless emotional power, securing her place as one of the most revered and compelling goddesses of the North. Thor, whose Old Norse name Thor is directly cognate with the word for thunder, is arguably one of the most revered and widely invoked deities in the Norse pantheon. He is not a god of subtle machinations or hidden knowledge in the vein of Odin. Rather, Thor is a deity of direct action, a bastion of physical prowess, and the principal guardian against the chaotic forces of the Jotnar, the giants, who perpetually threaten the order of the cosmos. His popularity among the common folk of ancient Scandinavia was immense, for he was seen as their stalwart protector, the one whose mighty hammer ensured their safety and the sanctity of their world. To understand the wellspring of Thor's incredible power, we must first examine his detailed genealogy. Thor is the mighty son of Odin, the Allfather, king of the Aesir. This divine paternity grants Thor his esteemed place among the gods of Asgard, and a lineage tracing back to the very progenitor of the Aesir. However, it is his maternal heritage that imbues him with his colossal earth-shaking strength. Thor's mother was Jord, whose name literally means earth. She is the personification of the terrestrial world itself, a powerful, primordial goddess, often considered a Jotun or giantess in her own right, and also known by the names Fjorgyn, the feminine form, as distinct from Frigg's father, or Hlod. This union of the Sky Father Odin with the Earth Mother Jord is a potent mythological archetype, and from it sprang a son who embodies the raw, untamed vigor of the earth, combined with the divine authority of the heavens. This dual heritage provides Thor with not only his incredible physical might, but also a profound intrinsic connection to Midgard, the realm of humanity, which he so fiercely and tirelessly defends. As a son of Odin, Thor has several notable half-brothers, including the radiant Balder, the unfortunate Hodder, the swift Hermod, the avenging Vidar, and the equally purposeful Vali, whose stories are intertwined with the fates of Odin and Frigg. Thor's own family, his wife and children, will be explored in due course, as they too play significant roles in his sagas and reflect his domains. Thor's primary divine functions are clear and resonant. He is the god of thunder, strength, and protection. His most iconic manifestation is as the god of thunder. The deafening roar of thunder across the stormy skies was believed to be the sound of his massive chariot wheels rolling across the heavens, or the reverberation of his mighty hammer, Mjöllnir, striking its mark. This association with storms naturally linked him to rain, and by extension, to the fertility of the land, for without the life-giving rains that accompany thunderstorms, crops would wither and fields would lie barren. While gods like Freya were more directly associated with peace and agricultural bounty, Thor's role in providing the necessary weather for growth was implicitly understood. His common epithets, Asa Thor meaning Thor of the Aesir, and Oku Thor, chariot Thor or driving Thor, further emphasize his divine status and his thunderous mode of travel. Beyond thunder, Thor is preeminently the god of strength. His physical might was considered unmatched among the Aesir, a colossal power that perhaps only his own son, Mjöllnir, would later rival. Unlike Odin, who often relied on cunning, magic, or strategic manipulation, Thor's primary approach to problem-solving was the application of overwhelming force. His sagas are replete with tales of his prodigious feats of strength, from wrestling giants to lifting unimaginable weights. This immense strength was not wielded for mere sport or personal aggrandizement. It was dedicated to his most crucial role, that of the god of protection. Thor was the principal defender of Asgard, the celestial realm of the gods, and even more so, of Midgard, the world of humankind. His chief adversaries were the Mjöllnir, the giants of Jotunheimr, who represented the forces of chaos, destruction, and the untamed wilderness, constantly seeking to encroach upon the ordered worlds of gods and mortals. Thor stood as the unwavering bulwark against these threats, his life a near-constant campaign of battling giants and monsters for the common people of the Viking Age, who lived in a world often perceived as harsh and threatened by hostile forces, both natural and supernatural. Thor was a comforting and empowering figure, a divine guardian who actively fought on their behalf. Runestones were often carved with invocations to Thor, seeking his protection for the living and the dead. While these are his primary domains, Thor also held other responsibilities. He was associated with hallowing or consecration using his hammer Mjöllnir, not only as a weapon but also as an instrument to sanctify people, places or events, such as blessing a marriage or consecrating a funeral pyre. In his relentless opposition to the forces of chaos, he can also be seen as a god who upholds law and order, maintaining the cosmic balance through his martial prowess. And, on a more personal note, Thor was renowned for his immense appetite and his equally impressive capacity for consuming ale and mead, traits which often feature humorously in his myths, but also underscore his larger-than-life, robust nature. Thor's ability to perform his divine duties and engage in his legendary feats was greatly enhanced by his iconic attributes, powerful possessions that are as famous as the god himself. Foremost among these is Mighty Hammer. The name Mjöllnir is thought to mean crusher, grinder, or perhaps even lightning, all fitting descriptions for such a devastating weapon. Mjöllnir was far more than a simple tool of war. It was a symbol of Thor's power, a divine instrument of immense magical properties. It was said that Mjöllnir, when thrown, would always strike its intended target and then, miraculously, return to Thor's hand. It could also shrink in size, allowing Thor to conveniently hide it within his tunic if needed. Its primary purpose was the smiting of giants and monsters, but, as mentioned, it was also used for hallowing, for blessing, and even for resurrecting his slain goats. The story of Mjöllnir's creation is a masterpiece of dwarven craftsmanship, born from a wager instigated by the ever-mischievous Loki, and is recounted in detail in the Skaldskaparmál. The tale begins with Loki, in a fit of pure malice, cutting off the beautiful golden hair of Thor's wife Sif while she slept. When Thor discovered this outrage, his fury was boundless. He seized Loki and threatened to break every single bone in his body unless he could rectify the situation. Terrified, Loki swore an oath that he would journey to Svartalfheim, the realm of the dark elves or dwarves, and persuade their master smiths to fashion new hair for Sif, made of the purest gold, that would grow upon her head as if it were natural. Loki travelled to the realm of the dwarves and approached the skilled artisans known as the Sons of Ivaldi. These dwarves, renowned for their exquisite craftsmanship, agreed to Loki's request and created not only Sif's magical golden hair, but also 2 other magnificent treasures: Skidbladnir, a wondrous ship for the god Freyr, so large it could hold all the Aesir, yet so cleverly constructed it could be folded up like a cloth and carried in a pocket; and Gungnir, a perfectly balanced spear for Odin, enchanted so that it would never miss its mark. Loki, ever the instigator, was not content. He boasted to another pair of dwarven brothers, Brokkr and his brother Sindri, also known as Eitri, that they could never create 3 treasures as fine as those made by the Sons of Ivaldi. Loki even wagered his own head on this claim. Sindri accepted the challenge. He set Brokkr to work the bellows in the forge, with the strict instruction that he must pump continuously and without interruption, no matter what happened, or all would be ruined. As Sindri placed the first piece of material, a pig's skin, into the forge, Loki, transforming himself into a gadfly, landed on Brokkr's hand and bit him sharply. But Brokkr, remembering Sindri's warning, continued to pump the bellows steadily. When Sindri drew the item from the fire, it was Gullinbursti, a magnificent boar with bristles of pure gold that glowed in the dark and could run faster than any horse through air or over sea. This treasure was destined for Freyr. Next, Sindri placed gold into the forge. Again, Loki, as the fly, attacked Brokkr, this time biting him on the neck, twice as hard as before. Yet Brokkr endured the pain and did not falter in his pumping. From the forge emerged Draupnir, a spectacular golden arm ring from which 8 identical gold rings of the same weight would drip every 9th night. This was to be Odin's ring. For the 3rd and final treasure, Sindri placed iron into the forge. This time, Loki, in his fly form, landed on Brokkr's eyelid and bit him so fiercely that blood streamed into his eye, momentarily blinding him. For just a heartbeat, Brokkr paused his work on the bellows to wipe the blood away. Though it was but a fraction of a second, it was enough. When Sindri pulled the final creation from the flames, it was enough. When Sindri pulled the final creation from the flames, it was enough. When Sindri pulled the final creation from the flames, it was enough. When Sindri pulled the final creation from the flames, it was enough. When Sindri pulled the final creation from the flames, it was a weapon of truly awesome power, perfect in every respect save one. Due to Brokkr's brief interruption, its handle was slightly shorter than it should have been. The time came for the judgment. The gods Odin, Thor, and Freyr were chosen as arbiters. Loki presented the gifts from the Sons of Ivaldi: Sif's golden hair, Freyr's ship Skidbladnir, and Odin's spear Gungnir. Then Brokkr, on behalf of Sindri, presented their 3 treasures: Freyr's boar Gullinbursti, Odin's ring Draupnir, and finally Thor's hammer, Mjöllnir. After careful consideration, the gods declared that Brokkr and Sindri's creations were the finest, with Mjöllnir being hailed as the greatest treasure of all, for it would provide the Aesir with their most potent defense against the ever-present threat of the frost giants. Mjöllnir was thus given to Thor. Brokkr then demanded Loki's head, as per their wager. Loki, however, cleverly argued that he had wagered his head, but not his neck, and therefore Brokkr had no claim upon it. Unable to take Loki's head without cutting his neck, Brokkr, with Thor's somewhat reluctant consent, or at least non-interference, decided instead to sew Loki's mouth shut with a thong named Vartari to punish him for his deceitful words and to prevent further boasts. This act, however, did not silence Loki for long. To wield the mighty Mjöllnir, especially with its short handle and the immense forces it generated, Thor required two other essential items of power. The first was Megingjord, his power belt, or belt of strength. When Thor fastened this belt around his waist, his already colossal divine strength was said to double, allowing him to perform even more incredible feats and to handle the immense energies of his hammer. The second was Jarngreipr, his iron grippers or iron gauntlets. These special iron gloves were necessary for Thor to get a firm and safe grip on Mjölnir's short handle and to protect his hands from the tremendous power and perhaps even the heat generated by the hammer when wielded in battle. Together, Mjölnir, Menjord, and Jarngreipr formed Thor's divine warrior toolkit, making him an almost unstoppable force against the enemies of Asgard and Midgard. Thor's primary mode of transport across the heavens and between the realms was his magnificent chariot. This chariot was not pulled by horses, as one might expect, but by two powerful male goats. Their names were Tannkristnir, meaning teeth-bearer or snarler, and Tanngrosser, meaning teeth-grinder. These were no ordinary animals. They possessed a remarkable and unique magical property, resurrection. The full story of Thor's goats and their magical ability is a fascinating one. When Thor was on a long journey and required sustenance for himself and any companions he might have, he could slaughter Tannkristnir and Tannanostr. He would then cook their meat, providing a hearty meal. However, there was a crucial instruction that had to be followed meticulously. All the bones from the consumed goats had to be carefully gathered and placed back onto the flayed goat skins, and most importantly, none of the bones were to be broken. The next morning, Thor would take his hammer, Mjölnir, and use it to hallow the skins and bones. At this sacred touch, the goats would be miraculously resurrected, whole and alive again, ready to continue pulling his chariot as if nothing had happened. This extraordinary ability is vividly illustrated during an incident that occurs in the prelude to Thor's famous journey to the castle of Utgarda-Loki. Thor, accompanied by Loki, stopped for the night at the farmstead of a poor peasant family. Being generous, Thor offered his own goats for their supper. He slaughtered Tannkristnir and Tannanostr, and they all feasted on the meat, with Thor giving his usual stern warning that all bones must be returned to the skins unbroken. However, Thialfi, the peasant's son, overcome by hunger or curiosity, disregarded Thor's command. He took one of the goat's thigh bones and, using his knife, split it open to suck out the rich marrow. The following morning, Thor prepared to depart. He laid out the goat skins, gathered the bones, and hallowed them with Mjölnir. The goats sprang back to life, but one of them was now lame in a hind leg, the leg whose thigh bone Thialfi had broken. Thor's reaction was one of terrifying fury. His eyes blazed, his hands gripped Mjölnir so tightly his knuckles were white, and the peasant family cowered in absolute terror, expecting to be annihilated. To appease the enraged god and atone for their son's transgression, the peasant offered his two children, Thialfi and his sister Röskva, to become Thor's lifelong bond servants. Thor accepted their service, and from that day forward, the swift-footed Thialfi and the capable Röskva often accompanied him on his many adventures, serving as his loyal attendants. This tale not only highlights the magical nature of Thor's goats and the power of Mjölnir, but also underscores the importance of respecting divine instructions and introduces Thor's human companions. Thor's family life further defines his character and his connections within the Aesir. His beloved wife was the beautiful goddess Sif. Sif is generally associated with the earth, fertility, and perhaps the golden fields of ripe grain, an image powerfully reinforced by her most famous attribute, her magnificent flowing golden hair. This hair was not merely beautiful, it was a symbol of her divinity and her connection to agricultural bounty. The story of Sif's golden hair is inextricably linked to Loki's mischief, and, as we have seen, ultimately to the creation of Mjölnir itself. In an act of pure, unadulterated malice, Loki crept into Thor's hall while Sif was asleep and sheared off every strand of her glorious golden hair, leaving her bald and shamed. When Sif awoke and discovered this violation, her distress was immense. Thor, upon seeing his wife so despoiled and learning that Loki was the culprit, flew into one of his legendary rages. He hunted down Loki and, seizing him, began to systematically threaten to break every bone in the trickster's body. Loki, terrified for his life, desperately swore to Thor that he would make amends. He promised to travel to Svartalfheimr, the realm of the dwarves, the master craftsmen of the cosmos, and persuade them to forge new hair for Sif, made of the finest gold, so cunningly wrought that it would attach to her head and grow just as her natural hair had done. As we know, Loki's journey to the dwarves to fulfill this oath led not only to the creation of Sif's new golden hair, but also to the forging of Odin's spear Gungnir, Freyr's ship Skidbladnir, Freyr's boar Gullinbusti, Odin's ring Draupnir, and most importantly for Thor, the mighty hammer Mjöllnir. The golden hair was indeed successfully crafted, a marvel of dwarven artistry. It was given to Sif and it seamlessly reattached to her scalp, growing even more radiant and beautiful than before, forever her defining feature and a testament to both Loki's treachery and the unparalleled skill of the dwarven smiths. Sif, as Thor's wife, stands as a symbol of fidelity, fruitfulness, and enduring beauty. Thor and Sif together had a daughter named Thrudra, whose name means strength or power. Thrudra was a formidable maiden, her power acknowledged to the extent that she is sometimes listed among the Valkyries, Odin's chooser of the slain. Her hand in marriage was once sought by the arrogant dwarf Alvis, leading to a contest of wits with Thor. Thor also fathered two incredibly strong sons, destined to play a role in the world after Ragnarok. Morgi, whose name signifies wrath or courage, was known for his fierce and brave nature. His mother is often unspecified in the myths, possibly being Sif or another consort. Thor's other renowned son was Magni, meaning strength or might. Magni's mother was the Jotun Jarnsaxa. Magni was possessed of truly prodigious strength from a remarkably young age. In the myth of Thor's duel with the giant Gungnir, it was Magni, then only 3 nights old, who was able to lift Gungnir's colossal leg off the trapped and struggling Thor after all the other adult Aesir had failed. For this feat, Thor gifted Magni with Gungnir's horse, Galfaxi. It is prophesied that after Ragnarok, when Thor himself has fallen in his mutual destruction with the Midgard serpent, his sons Modi and Magni will survive and inherit his mighty hammer, Mjöllnir, signifying the continuation of strength, protection, and order in the new world that will emerge from the ashes of the old. Thor also had a stepson, Ur, who was Sif's son from a previous union, his father not typically being named in the surviving myths. Thor thus became Ur's stepfather. Ur was a significant god in his own right, associated with archery, hunting, skiing, and shields, a winter deity of considerable skill and prowess. The true measure of Thor, however, lies in his major myths, the sagas that recount his heroic deeds, his relentless battles, and his unwavering defense of the cosmos. These stories are not mere entertainment, they are foundational narratives that explore themes of order versus chaos, strength versus cunning, and the enduring spirit of protection. We shall now embark on an exhaustive analysis of these epic encounters. Our first deep dive into Thor's legendary encounters takes us on a perilous and perplexing journey to the stronghold of the formidable giant king Utgarda Loki. This adventure, undertaken by Thor in the company of the ever-present trickster Loki, and later joined by Thor's human bond-servants, the swift Thialfi and his sister Roskva, is not a straightforward battle of might against might, but rather a series of cunning tests and illusions designed to confound and humiliate the mighty god of thunder. The journey began with Thor and Loki traveling eastward in Thor's goat-drawn chariot. As night fell, they sought shelter at the farmstead of a poor peasant. It was here, as we have previously detailed, that Thor slaughtered his goats, Tangrishnir and Tangnoshtia, for their evening meal, and where Thialfi, the peasant's son, broke one of the goat's thigh bones to suck the marrow. This act of disobedience led to one of the goats being lamed upon its resurrection the next morning, and resulted in Thialfi and Roskva becoming Thor's servants, thereafter accompanying him on this very journey. Leaving the chariot and goats behind, Thor, Loki, Thjalfi and Röskva continued on foot, venturing deep into the vast and treacherous expanses of Jotunheimr, the realm of the giants. After traversing a dark forest, they came upon an immense and strangely shaped building as night approached. Finding no inhabitants, they sought shelter inside. They settled in this side chamber for the night. However, their rest was disturbed by tremendous earthquakes and a deafening roaring sound that filled the air. Frightened, Thor and his companions retreated further into the side chamber, while Thor, ever vigilant, stood guard at its entrance, Mjöllnir in hand. When dawn broke, Thor ventured outside and discovered the source of the nocturnal disturbances. Lying nearby was a giant of truly colossal proportions, snoring thunderously. This, they realized, was the building they had slept in. What they had mistaken for the main hall was the giant's mitten, and the side chamber had been its thumb. Thor, angered by the fright the giant had caused, girded himself with his belt of strength, Megginjord, and prepared to strike the sleeping behemoth with Mjöllnir. But just as he was about to deliver the blow, the giant awoke, stretched, and introduced himself good-naturedly as Skrymir, meaning big fellow or boaster. Skrymir, surprisingly amiable, recognized Thor and proposed that they travel together, offering to carry all their provisions in his own knapsack. Thor agreed, and they bundled their food into Skrymmir's bag. They journeyed together for the rest of the day. When night fell again, Skrymir found a spot beneath a large oak tree and, announcing he was tired, promptly fell asleep, his snores once again shaking the forest. Thor and his companions, meanwhile, prepared to eat, but they found themselves utterly unable to untie the straps of Skrymir's knapsack no matter how hard they pulled. Thor's frustration grew into a rage. Believing Skrymir had deliberately made the bag impossible to open, he took Mjöllnir and struck the sleeping giant squarely on the head. Skrymir merely stirred, asking if a leaf had fallen on him and if they had eaten yet. Thor, astonished, claimed they were just about to eat. A little later, around midnight, Skrymir's snoring became unbearable. Thor, now thoroughly incensed, rose again and delivered a second, even more powerful blow with Mjöllnir to the crown of Skrymir's head. He felt the hammer sink deep into the giant's skull. Skrymir awoke again, this time asking, "What was that? Did an acorn fall on my head? And how are you doing, Thor?" Thor, taken aback by the giant's resilience, muttered that he had just woken up himself and that it was still early. He resolved that if he got a third chance, Skrymir would not see another dawn. Just before daybreak, as Skrymir slept soundly, Thor crept up and, summoning all his divine strength, unleashed a third tremendous blow with Mjöllnir, aiming for the giant's temple. The hammer sank in up to its handle. Skrymir sat up, stroked his cheek, and inquired if some birds nesting in the oak tree above had perhaps dropped some twigs on him. He then announced it was time to part ways. He advised Thor and his companions that they were approaching the castle of Utgarda-Loki. He warned them that the giants there were not small fellows like himself, and that they should behave modestly, for Utgarda-Loki's courtiers did not take kindly to the boasting of little runts. He then pointed them in the direction of the castle and, picking up his knapsack, strode off into the forest, leaving Thor and his companions perplexed and somewhat humiliated by their inability to harm him or even open his bag. Thor, Loki, Thjalfi and Röskva continued their journey and around midday came in sight of a colossal castle, so tall they had to crane their necks all the way back to see its top. The castle gate was barred, but they managed to squeeze between the bars. Inside, they found a vast hall filled with many giants seated on benches. Presiding over them all, on a high seat, was the king, Utgarda-Loki himself. Utgarda-Loki greeted them with a mocking smile, remarking that he recognized the famous Aesir Thor and asking if he was perhaps greater than he appeared. He then declared that no one was permitted to stay in his hall unless they could perform some feat or demonstrate some craft in which they excelled. Loki, ever boastful, was the first to speak, claiming that he could eat faster than anyone present. Utgarda-Loki accepted the challenge and called forth one of his men, a thin giant named Logi, to compete against Loki. A long wooden trough filled with meat was placed in the center of the hall. Loki started at one end and Logi at the other. They ate with ferocious speed, meeting exactly in the middle of the trough. However, while Loki had consumed all the meat on his side, Loki had devoured not only the meat, but also the bones and the wooden trough itself. Loki was thus declared the loser. Next, Utgarda-Loki asked what the young man Thialfi could do. Thialfi, renowned for his swiftness, offered to run a race against anyone Utgarda-Loki might choose. The king agreed and selected a slender young giant named Hugi as Thialfi's opponent. They went out to a designated racecourse. In the first race, Hugi was so far ahead that he turned back at the finish line to meet Thialfi. Utgarda-Loki encouraged Thialfi, saying he would need to exert himself more to win. In the second race, Hugi again reached the finish line and turned back, while Thialfi was still a long bowshot away. In the third and final race, Hugi had already finished and was waiting while Thialfi had not even reached the halfway mark. Thialfi was soundly defeated. Finally, it was Thor's turn. Utgarda-Loki asked what feat the mighty god of thunder wished to display. Thor, undaunted by the previous failures, declared that he would compete in a drinking contest. Utgarda-Loki ordered one of his servants to bring forth the penance horn, a large drinking horn from which his courtiers were accustomed to drink if they had committed some minor offense. He told Thor that it was considered a good drink. If one could empty the horn in a single draught, some men needed 2, but no one was so poor a drinker that they could not finish it in 3. Thor looked at the horn. It seemed large, but not excessively so. Being very thirsty, he put it to his lips and took an enormous gulp, drinking for as long as he could hold his breath. When he lowered the horn to see his progress, the liquid level had barely diminished. Utgarda-Loki remarked that he had drunk well, but not exceptionally so, and that if anyone had told him Thor couldn't take a bigger draught, he wouldn't have believed it. Thor, saying nothing, put the horn to his lips again and drank with all his might, until he was completely out of breath. This time, when he looked, the level had gone down somewhat more, but it was still far from empty. Utgarda-Loki commented that Thor had left rather a lot for his third attempt, and that if he didn't perform better, he wouldn't be considered as great a man among the giants as he was among the Aesir. Thor, now enraged, seized the horn for a third time and drank with desperate fury, swallowing as much as he possibly could. When he finally set the horn down, he saw that he had made a noticeable difference, but a significant amount of liquid still remained. He declared he would drink no more. Utgarda-Loki, feigning disappointment, suggested that perhaps Thor's strength lay in other areas. He proposed a seemingly simple feat, lifting the king's cat from the floor. A large grey cat jumped down into the hall. Thor approached it, placed his hand under its belly, and tried to lift it. But the cat merely arched its back as Thor lifted, and no matter how high Thor stretched his arms, the cat's back arched higher. Thor strained with all his might, but he could only succeed in making one of the cat's paws lift slightly from the floor. He was forced to admit defeat in this contest as well. Thor, now thoroughly humiliated and angry, demanded one final challenge. He would wrestle anyone Utgarda-Loki chose. The king looked around his hall and said that while it would be demeaning to ask any of his full-grown men to wrestle Thor, given his diminished performance, he would call forth his old foster mother, an ancient crone named Elli. An old, withered woman entered the hall. Utgarda-Loki told Thor that Elli had thrown men who seemed no less strong than him. The wrestling match began. The more Thor struggled and strained, the firmer Elli stood. The old woman then began to force Thor back. After a long and arduous struggle, Thor was brought down to one knee. At that point, Utgarda-Loki stepped forward and declared the contest over, stating that Thor would find few who could defeat him if he had such trouble with an old woman. Having failed in every contest, Thor and his companions spent the night in Utgarda-Loki's hall, though they were treated with hospitality. The next morning, as they prepared to depart, Utgarda-Loki himself escorted them out of the castle and beyond its gates. Once they were safely outside, Utgarda-Loki finally spoke plainly to Thor. He revealed that all they had experienced since meeting him as Skrymir had been a series of illusions and deceptions, designed to protect his realm from Thor's renowned might. He confessed that he had been the giant Skrymir. The knapsack that Thor could not open had been secured with trick bands of iron. The 3 blows Thor had struck Skrymir with Mjöllnir had not, in fact, hit Skrymir at all. Utgarda-Loki pointed to 3 square-shaped valleys in a nearby mountain range. Those, he said, were the marks of Thor's hammer blows. If the blows had landed on him, he would have been killed. Then he explained the contests in the castle. Loki's opponent in the eating contest, Logi, had not been a man, but wildfire itself, which consumes everything in its path. Thialfi's opponent in the foot race, Hugi, had been thought, or mind, which is swifter than any runner. The drinking horn from which Thor had tried to drink had its other end connected to the great world ocean. Thor's mighty draughts had been so immense that he had actually lowered the sea level, creating what mortals would thereafter call the tides. The grey cat Thor had struggled to lift was none other than Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent which encircles the entire earth. Thor had stretched the serpent so far that its head and tail had nearly touched, and everyone in the castle had been terrified when they saw him lift one of its paws. And finally, the old woman Ellie, with whom Thor had wrestled, was old age itself, a force that no one, god or mortal, can ever truly overcome. Utgarda-Loki concluded by saying that it would be better for both sides if they never met again, for he would always defend his castle with similar illusions. Upon hearing these revelations, Thor, filled with rage at having been so thoroughly deceived, raised Mjöllnir to strike Utgarda-Loki. But at that very instant, Utgarda-Loki and his entire castle vanished completely, leaving Thor and his companions standing alone on an empty plain. There was nothing left for them to do but to turn back towards Asgard, their minds reeling from the experience. This journey to Utgard is profoundly significant. It serves as a crucial lesson, even for a god as mighty as Thor, demonstrating that brute strength alone is not always enough to overcome every obstacle. It highlights the cunning of the giants, their mastery of magic and illusion, and the existence of cosmic forces, like the ocean, the world serpent, and old age, that are beyond even Thor's direct control. While Thor was tricked, and in a sense defeated in the contests, the sheer scale of his failures, creating the tides, nearly lifting the Midgard serpent, and wrestling old age to a standstill by being brought to only one knee, actually underscores his immense, almost unimaginable power. He may have been outwitted, but his fundamental strength remained awe-inspiring. The tale is a rich exploration of perception versus reality, and the limitations of even the mightiest gods when faced with the fundamental nature of existence or the clever deceptions of powerful adversaries. Another of Thor's most celebrated and defining encounters was his ferocious battle with the Jotun Gungnir, the strongest of the giants. This duel showcases Thor's role as Asgard's champion, his unyielding courage, and also introduces the prodigious strength of his young son Magnir. The conflict began with a contest of speed between Odin, mounted on his 8-legged steed Sleipnir, and the giant Gungnir, who rode his magnificent horse Gulfaxi, or Golden Mane. Odin, goaded by Gungnir's boasts about Gulfaxi's swiftness, raced the giant across the realms. Sleipnir, of course, proved faster, but Gungnir, in his fury and determination to keep up, rode Gulfaxi all the way into the very gates of Asgard. Once inside the realm of the gods, Gungnir, as giants often did, began to drink heavily of the Aesir's ale and soon became belligerently drunk. In his intoxicated state, he boasted loudly and offensively. He threatened to destroy Asgard, kill all the gods except for Freya and Sif, whom he intended to take for himself, and carry Valhalla off to Jotunheim on his back. The Aesir, growing increasingly alarmed and disgusted by his behaviour, finally decided they had had enough. They called upon their mightiest champion Thor, who was away in the east battling trolls. When Thor arrived and heard of Hrungnir's insolent threats, his rage was immediate. He confronted the giant, Mjöllnir in hand, and challenged him to a formal duel, a hongang, to settle the matter. Hrungnir, though momentarily sobered by the sight of the enraged Thor, accepted the challenge. The place appointed for the duel was Greotnugard, the stone Fensalir, located on the border between Asgard and Jotunheim. Gungnir returned to Jotunheim to prepare. He was a formidable opponent indeed. His heart was made of hard, sharp stone with 3 points. His head was also made of stone. For a weapon, he carried an enormous whetstone, and for protection, a massive shield of stone. The other giants, fearing for Gungnir but also wanting to aid him, constructed a colossal figure out of clay, 9 leagues high and 3 leagues broad. They named this clay giant Mjöllnir, or Mist Kelf. However, they could not find a heart large enough for such a creature, so they were forced to use the heart of a mare. This proved to be its undoing, for Mjöllnir, despite its intimidating size, possessed a cowardly mare's heart and was terrified at the prospect of facing Thor. As the time for the duel approached, Thor's servant Tjalfi ran ahead to Grjotunagard. He cleverly approached Gungnir and, pretending to offer advice, told the giant, "You are unwise, giant, to stand there holding your shield before you. Thor has seen you, and he will come at you from underground." Gungnir, believing this deception, placed his stone shield on the ground beneath his feet and stood upon it, thus leaving his upper body exposed. Soon, Thor arrived in a blaze of lightning and thunder. He raised Mjöllnir and hurled it with all his might towards Gungnir. At the same instant, Gungnir swung his massive whetstone and threw it at Thor. The 2 mighty projectiles met in midair with a cataclysmic crash. Mjöllnir, the superior weapon, shattered the whetstone into countless pieces. These fragments rained down across all the worlds, and it is said that all true whetstones found thereafter originate from these shards. One particularly large piece of the shattered whetstone, however, struck Thor squarely in the forehead, lodging itself deep within his skull. Despite this grievous wound, Mjöllnir continued its flight and struck Gungnir's stone head, smashing it into smithereens. The mighty giant crashed to the ground, dead. As he fell, one of his enormous legs landed across Thor's neck, pinning the god to the earth. Mjöllnir, the clay giant, upon seeing Thor, was said to have wet himself in terror and was easily dispatched by Thjalfi. Thor lay trapped beneath Gungnir's colossal leg, and none of the Aesir who rushed to his aid, not even Odin himself, possessed the strength to lift it. Just when it seemed Thor would remain pinned indefinitely, a new figure arrived on the scene. Magni, Thor's own son by the giantess Jarnsaxa. Magni was then only 3 nights old, yet he possessed strength that surpassed all the adult gods present. He calmly walked over to Gungnir's leg and, with seemingly little effort, lifted it from his father's neck, remarking that it was a shame he had arrived so late, or he would have struck the giant down with his bare fists. Thor, immensely proud and grateful, declared that Magni would surely become a great hero and, as a reward for his feat, gifted him Gungnir's magnificent horse, Gulfaxi. Odin, however, was somewhat displeased that Thor had given such a fine horse to the son of a giantess, rather than to himself, his own father. Though freed, Thor still suffered greatly from the whetstone fragment embedded in his forehead. The Aesir summoned a wise seeress named Groa, the wife of Orvandil the Bold, who was renowned for her skill in magical charms and healing. Groa began to chant powerful incantations over Thor, and the whetstone in his head began to loosen. Thor, feeling relief and wanting to reward Groa for her efforts, told her some joyous news. He recounted how he had recently carried her husband, Orvandil, in a basket on his back across the venomous rivers of Elevigar, rescuing him from Jotunheim. During the crossing, one of Orvandil's toes had stuck out of the basket and become frostbitten. Thor had broken off the frozen toe and hurled it into the heavens, where it became the star known as Orvandil's toe. He assured Groa that Orvandil would soon be home. Groa was so overcome with joy at this news of her long-lost husband that she completely forgot all her magical charms. As a result, the whetstone fragment ceased to loosen and remained permanently lodged in Thor's forehead. It is said that from that day on, one should never throw a whetstone across a room, lest it stir the fragment in Thor's head and cause him discomfort. The battle with Gungnir is a classic Thor saga, highlighting his role as the indispensable protector of Asgard, his raw power, and his indomitable courage. It also serves to introduce the next generation of strength in his son Mjöllnir, foreshadowing the continuation of this protective might. The myth explains the origin of all whetstones and the star Örvandil's toe, embedding the divine conflict within the natural world and the cosmos. It also underscores a recurring theme. Even in victory, Thor often bears a lasting mark of his encounters, a testament to the perilous nature of his duties. Perhaps no adversary tested Thor's strength and determination more directly, nor brought him closer to a cosmic confrontation than his encounters with Jormungand, the Midgard serpent. This colossal serpent, one of Loki's monstrous offspring, was cast into the great ocean encircling Midgard by Odin. There, Jormungand grew to such an immense size that it could bite its own tail, forming an unbroken ring around the world of mortals. The most famous tale of Thor's attempt to deal with this world-threatening creature is his fishing expedition, primarily recounted in the poem Hemiskvidar. The story begins with the Aesir desiring a grand feast, and Aegir, the sea giant known for his brewing prowess, being tasked with providing the ale. Aegir, however, declared that he lacked a cauldron large enough to brew ale for all the gods. The god Tyr then recalled that his father, the fierce Jotun Hymir, possessed an immensely large and strong cauldron. Thus, Thor and Tyr set out on a journey to Hymir's hall in Jotunheimr to procure this essential vessel. Upon their arrival, Hymir's wife, or in some versions his 900-headed grandmother, and a beautiful golden-hailed consort greeted them. Aware of Hymir's notoriously foul temper and his hostility towards guests, especially Aesir, she advised Thor and Tyr to hide beneath some large cauldrons hanging from a beam. When Hymir returned from his day of hunting, his icy gaze shattered the pillar near where they hid, and the beam broke, causing all but one of the cauldrons, the very one they sought, to crash to the floor and shatter. Hymir, though initially displeased to see Thor, the notorious giant masher, in his hall, grudgingly offered them hospitality, slaughtering 3 oxen for their meal. Thor, with his legendary appetite, consumed 2 of the oxen entirely by himself, much to Hymir's dismay. The next morning, Hymir announced he was going sea fishing and invited Thor to join him if Thor could provide his own bait. Thor, never one to shirk a challenge, went to Hymir's herd of oxen, seized the largest bull, and with his bare hands tore off its head to use as bait. Hymir, though impressed by Thor's strength, was inwardly alarmed. They set out in Hymir's boat. Hymir rowed them to his usual fishing grounds, where he was accustomed to catching flatfish. Thor, however, declared these waters too shallow and, taking the oars himself, began to row them much farther out to sea, despite Hymir's increasingly anxious protests. Thor rowed with such power that Hymir feared they were entering the perilous waters where the Midgard serpent itself resided. Finally, Thor stopped rowing far out in the deep ocean. He baited his incredibly strong fishing line and hook with the entire ox head and cast it into the waves. Down in the abyssal depths, Jormungandr, the world serpent, sensed the bait. The monster seized the ox head, and the hook lodged firmly in its venomous palate. When Thor felt the colossal tug on his line, he braced himself. His divine strength surging, he pulled with such immense force that his feet crashed right through the bottom of Hymir's boat, and he stood braced upon the very seabed itself. The struggle was titanic. Thor pulled, and Jormungandr thrashed and resisted, the waves boiling around them. Slowly, inexorably, Thor began to draw the monstrous serpent upwards. The serpent's horrifying, venom-dripping head, vast beyond imagining, broke the surface of the ocean. The sight was one of cosmic terror. The god of thunder, eyes blazing, locked in a life-or-death struggle with the serpent that encircled the world. Jormungandr writhed, spewing black poison that stained the sea and air, its gaze meeting Thor's in a moment of primal enmity. Thor reached for Mjöllnir, preparing to deliver a death blow to his ancient foe. At this critical juncture, Hymir, who had been cowering in the boat, utterly terrified by the sight of the world serpent and the ferocity of the battle, panicked. Fearing that the boat would be swamped or that some greater calamity would befall them, he took his bait knife and, in a moment of sheer terror, cut Thor's fishing line. With a deafening hiss and a tremendous surge, Jormungand, freed from the hook, sank back into the black depths of the ocean. Thor's fury was beyond description. Robbed of his ultimate confrontation, he turned his rage upon Hymir. Accounts differ as to the giant's exact fate. Some say Thor struck him such a blow with his fist that Hymir was knocked overboard and drowned. Others claim Thor smashed his head with Mjöllnir. Though deprived of his chance to slay the serpent, Thor still needed the cauldron. After returning to Hymir's hall, perhaps with the now subdued or absent Hymir, Thor faced further tests of strength from the remaining giants or from Hymir himself, such as being challenged to break Hymir's magic goblet, which he only succeeded in doing by throwing it against Hymir's stone head, on the advice of Hymir's consort, before he was finally able to take the massive cauldron. He and Tyr then carried it back to Asgard, where Aegir could finally brew ale for the gods' feast. Thor's fishing expedition for Jormungand is one of the most powerful and symbolic myths in the Norse canon. It portrays Thor in his role as a defender against ultimate cosmic chaos, confronting a creature whose very existence threatens the stability of Midgard. The image of Thor, feet planted on the ocean floor, battling the world's serpent, is an icon of divine strength and determination. Hymir's cowardly act of cutting the line is deeply significant as it ensures that Jormungandr survives, destined to meet Thor again in their mutual destruction at Ragnarok. This encounter is not just a fishing trip, it is a skirmish in an ongoing war between cosmic order and primordial chaos, a battle deferred but not ultimately avoided. Not all of Thor's adventures were grim battles against monstrous foes. Some, like the tale of his recovery of Mjöllnir, as recounted in the delightful poem Thrymskvida, or The Lay of Thrym, are filled with humor, cunning, and a memorable instance of divine cross-dressing. The story begins when Thor awakens one morning to find that his most prized possession, his mighty hammer Mjöllnir, is missing. His immediate reaction is one of rage and panic. He shakes his beard, his hair stands on end, and he searches frantically. He confides in Loki, who immediately suspects giant work. Loki then borrows Freyja's magical falcon feather cloak, which allows the wearer to fly, and journeys to Jotunheimr to investigate. In the land of the giants, Loki encounters Thryma, the lord of the Jotunar. Thryma brazenly admits to having stolen Mjöllnir. He has hidden it 8 leagues beneath the earth, and declares that he will only return the hammer if the beautiful goddess Freyja is given to him as his wife. Loki returns to Asgard with this unwelcome news. When Freyja is informed of Thryma's demand, she reacts with such furious indignation that her famous necklace, Brisingamen, bursts apart from the force of her rage. She vehemently refuses to go to Jotunheimr to marry a giant. The gods hold an urgent council to decide how to retrieve the hammer, for without Mjöllnir, Asgard's primary defense against the giants is lost. It is the wise god Heimdallr, the ever-watchful guardian of the Bifrost Bridge, who proposes a cunning, if unconventional, plan. He suggests that they dress Thor himself as Freyja, adorning him with bridal linen, keys jangling at his belt, a woman's cap, and Freyja's own magnificent Brisingamen necklace. Thor would then go to Jotunheimr in Freyja's guise, and once the hammer was presented during the wedding ceremony, he could reclaim it. Thor is initially outraged by this suggestion. He protests vehemently, declaring that the other gods would call him ergi, unmanly, or perverted if he were to dress as a woman. However, Loki, ever pragmatic, points out that if Thor does not agree to the plan, the giants will soon conquer Asgard, now that Mjöllnir is gone. Reluctantly, Thor consents. The gods then set about transforming the mighty god of thunder into a blushing bride. They dress him in a long bridal gown, place a headdress with flowing veils upon his head, hang housewives' keys from his belt, and drape the brilliant Brisingamen around his neck. To complete the disguise, Loki offers to accompany Thor as his handmaiden, dressed in servant girl's attire. Together, the bride and her handmaiden journey in Thor's chariot to Jotunheimr. Thryma is overjoyed at the arrival of his supposed bride, and orders a magnificent wedding feast to be prepared. During the lavish banquet, Thor's true nature almost betrays him. The disguised god of thunder proceeds to eat an entire ox, 8 whole salmon, all the dainties prepared for the women guests, and drinks 3 full tons of mead. Thrymer, astonished by his bride's prodigious appetite, remarks upon it. The quick-witted Loki, in his role as the handmaiden, smoothly explains that Freya had been so overcome with longing for Jotunheimer and her wedding that she had fasted for 8 full nights. Later, Thrymer, eager for a kiss, lifts the bride's veil, only to leap back in alarm at the sight of Thor's fierce, burning eyes glaring out at him. Again, Loki saves the situation, explaining that Freya's eyes were so fiery because she had not slept for 8 nights. So intense was her anticipation of marrying Thrymer. As the wedding ceremony was about to reach its climax, Thrymer's sister, an old giantess, approaches the bride and audaciously asks for a bridal gift, the customary red rings from her fingers. But the crucial moment arrives when, according to custom, the sacred hammer Mjöllnir is to be brought forth and placed upon the bride's lap to hallow the union and bless their marriage. As soon as Mjöllnir is within his reach, Thor's heart laughs within him. He seizes his beloved hammer, his disguise instantly forgotten. His first act is to strike down Thrymer, killing the giant king with a single blow. He then turns his fury upon the rest of the assembled giants, slaughtering them all, including Thrymer's greedy sister who had demanded the bridal gift. With Mjöllnir recovered and the giant threat neutralized, Thor and Loki return triumphantly to Asgard. Trimskved is a beloved poem, celebrated for its humor, its clever plot, and its playful depiction of the gods. It showcases Thor's utter reliance on Mjöllnir, not just as a weapon, but as an integral part of his identity and Asgard's security. It also highlights Loki's indispensable cunning and his ability to salvage difficult situations with his quick wit, even if he was often the cause of the trouble in the first place. The motif of Thor's cross-dressing is a source of great comedic effect, playing on the contrast between his hyper-masculine image and the feminine attire he is forced to adopt. The poem cleverly satirizes the giants' foolishness and their lustful desire for the goddesses of Asgard, ultimately reaffirming Thor's role as their indomitable and rightful scourge. Not all of Thor's encounters relied on disguise or humor. Many were grim and perilous confrontations, such as his visit to the hall of the Jotun. This tale demonstrates Thor's courage and resourcefulness even when deprived of his usual divine weaponry. The adventure begins, as so many troubles do, with Loki. Flying in a hawk shape, borrowed from Frigg or Freya, Loki is captured by the giant Geirrod. Geirrod, recognizing the trickster god, imprisons Loki in a chest and starves him for 3 months, until Loki, weakened and desperate, agrees to Geirrod's terms to save his own life. Loki swears an oath to lure Thor to Geirrod's hall, but with a crucial condition. Thor must come without his hammer, Mjöllnir, his belt of strength, Meggingjord, and his iron gauntlets, Jarngripr. Geirrod, known for his cruelty and hatred of Thor, clearly intended to ambush and destroy the thunder god. Loki, true to his coerced oath, persuades Thor to visit Geirrod, perhaps by appealing to Thor's pride or downplaying any potential danger. Thor, unsuspecting or perhaps overconfident, sets out with Loki, leaving his primary items of power behind in Asgard. On their journey, they stop for the night at the dwelling of a friendly giantess named Geirrod. She learns of Thor's destination and Geirrod's treacherous nature. Concerned for Thor's safety, Geirrod warns him of the extreme danger he is walking into, and since he is without his own gear, she lends him her own items of power: a sturdy belt of strength, a pair of iron gauntlets, and her powerful magical staff, Gridarvollr, or Grid's staff. Thus equipped, Thor and Loki continue their journey. They come to the great river Vimur, the largest of all rivers. As Thor begins to wade across, carrying Loki, the river suddenly begins to swell and rise at an alarming rate. Thor looks upstream and sees Gulp, one of Geirrod's 2 giant daughters, straddling the river and urinating into it, causing the flood. Enraged, Thor picks up a large stone from the riverbed and hurls it at Galp, shouting, "A river should be damned at its source." He then uses Griddar's staff, Griddarvola, to brace himself against the powerful current and successfully reaches the other bank. Once ashore, he grabs a rowan tree, or in some versions, is pulled ashore by it, leading to the saying, "Rowan is Thor's salvation," and pulls himself up. Arriving at Geirrodr's hall, Thor is shown to a seat. As he sits down, he suddenly feels the chair rising beneath him, pushing him upwards towards the rafters with the intent to crush him. Reacting instantly, Thor thrusts Griddarvola against the roof beams and pushes down with all his might. A sickening crack is heard, followed by screams. He has broken the backs of Geirrodr's 2 daughters, Gelpiop and Grip, who had been hiding beneath his chair and attempting to kill him. Geirrodr then enters the hall and, feigning hospitality, invites Thor to join in some games. He orders a great fire to be lit, and using a pair of tongs, his servants pull a huge, red-hot lump of molten iron from the flames. Geirrodr then hurls this searing projectile directly at Thor. Thor, using Geirrodr's borrowed iron gauntlets, catches the molten lump in mid-air. Geirrodr, seeing this, tries to hide behind a large iron pillar. Thor, with a mighty roar, hurls the red-hot iron back with such force that it smashes clean through the iron pillar, then through Geirrodr himself, killing him instantly, and finally buries itself deep in the earth outside the hall. Having thus dispatched Geirrodr and his murderous daughters, Thor, his mission, though unintended, accomplished, returns to Asgard, his reputation as the unyielding foe of giants further solidified. This myth is significant because it showcases Thor's ability to overcome extreme danger, even when deprived of his signature weapons, Mjöllnir and Megingjord, highlighting his innate strength, his quick reflexes, and his resourcefulness. Aided by the timely assistance of the benevolent giantess Gridda, it underscores the constant treachery of the giants and Thor's unwavering role as their punisher. Our final major myth involving Thor reveals a different aspect of his character, one where cunning and knowledge, rather than brute force, win the day. This is the tale recounted in the poem Alvismal, the Lay of Alvis, or the Sayings of All Wise. The story unfolds as Thor returns to Asgard after an absence to find an unwelcome visitor, a dwarf named Alvis, whose name ironically means All Wise. This dwarf has come to claim Thor's daughter, the powerful maiden Thruda, as his bride. It appears that Thruda had been promised to Alvis at some earlier time, perhaps by the other gods while Thor was away on one of his giant smithing expeditions. Thor, protective of his daughter and clearly unimpressed by the dwarf suitor, is not at all pleased with this arrangement. Thor confronts Alvis, noting his pale complexion and generally unwholesome subterranean appearance, and questions his claim. Alvis, proud and arrogant, insists on the validity of the pledge and his right to marry Thrudra. Thor, unable to directly refuse a vow perhaps made by other gods in his name, devises a clever plan. He tells Alvis that he will consent to the marriage, but only on one condition. Alvis must prove his vaunted wisdom by answering every question Thor puts to him concerning the names of various things throughout the cosmos. Alvis, confident in his encyclopedic knowledge, readily agrees to the test. Thor then begins a lengthy interrogation, asking Alvis to reveal the different names used for a series of common yet cosmologically significant entities such as Earth, Sky, Moon, Sun, Clouds, Wind, Calm, Sea, Fire, Wood, Night, Seed, Barley/grain, and Aele, as they are known by various races and beings, by men, by the Aesir gods, by the Vanir gods, by the Dvergor dwarves, his own kin, and even by the beings in hell. Alvis, true to his name, answers each question flawlessly, providing a rich poetic catalogue of synonyms and kennings from the diverse languages and perspectives of the 9 realms. He demonstrates a truly astonishing breadth of cosmological, mythological, and linguistic lore. For example, he explains that Earth is called Jord by men, Fold by the Aesir, Veg, grey by the Vanir, Aigrains by giants, Grandi by elves, and Aur, wet clay/mud in hell, he provides similar lists for all of Thor's queries. Thor, however, is not merely interested in the dwarf's erudition. His strategy is one of delay. He continues to ply Alvis with more and more questions, drawing out the contest, praising the dwarf's immense knowledge, while subtly prolonging the exchange. The all-wise dwarf, eager to display his intellectual superiority and secure his bride, falls into Thor's trap, discoursing at length. The night wears on, and Alvis, engrossed in his own eloquence, fails to notice the passage of time. Finally, as he concludes his litany of names, Thor delivers his masterstroke. He declares that he has never encountered anyone with so much ancient wisdom packed into a single breast. He then points out, with feigned surprise, that the sun has risen and its rays are now streaming into the hall. "You have been tricked, dwarf, by the daylight. The sun now shines in the..." Alvis, caught unawares by the dawn, is instantly turned to stone, for it is a well-known vulnerability of dwarves in Norse mythology that they cannot endure the direct rays of the sun. Thor, through his cunning and his knowledge of dwarven weaknesses, has successfully outwitted the all-wise suitor and protected his daughter Thrud from an unwanted marriage, not by a blow of his hammer, but by a clever manipulation of time and a contest of words. Alvismal is a unique and fascinating poem. It showcases a different side of Thor, revealing his capacity for cunning and strategic thinking when direct force is not the most appropriate solution. It also serves as a valuable repository of poetic synonyms and cosmological lore, presented within an engaging narrative framework. The poem highlights the traditional animosity, or at least a hierarchical relationship between gods and dwarfs, and the specific vulnerability of dwarves to sunlight. Thor, in this instance, acts not only as a powerful god, but also as a protective father, using his intellect to safeguard his family. These myths, from the deceptive illusions of Utgarda Loki's castle to the raw fury of the duel with Gungnir, from the cosmic struggle with the Midgard serpent to the comedic recovery of Mjöllnir and the intellectual sparring with Alvis, paint a rich and multifaceted portrait of Thor. He is the embodiment of strength, the champion of order, the protector of the vulnerable, and a god whose presence is both awe-inspiring and, at times, surprisingly relatable. His enduring popularity stems from this potent combination of immense power, righteous fury against evil, unwavering determination, and a fundamental, straightforward heroism that resonates through the ages. He is the thunderous heartbeat of the Aesir, a force of nature dedicated to the preservation of the worlds against the encroaching darkness. And that is it. If you've enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the Purple Files, click the like button, and drop a comment down below. More videos to come, and until then, thanks for watching.